Welcome back to Introduction to iOS Application Development at SSFS. In this video, we are going to take a look at Xcode proper. Up until this point, we've been working with playgrounds to get an idea of how Swift code runs, but now we're going to look at the actual interface of Xcode itself. So in the past, we've been using these playgrounds, but now we're going to choose Create a new Xcode project. So if I click on that, it may take a second to come up. I can choose an iOS project, a watchOS project, and so on. And under iOS, I have a single view app, a game, augmented reality, number of options. For the most part, we're going to stick with single view app. So make sure that's selected and hit next. There are a number of options here that we'll go over as we go through this course, but for right now, we're just going to give your app a name. We'll call it testing for right now, but this would be where you would put the name of your app. And we want to make sure that the language is Swift. And we're not going to worry about the other options for right now. Let's go ahead and click Next. Now we're going to choose where to save it, and you can see I have an option to create a Git repository, but we're going to do that manually, so you don't need to check that now. So let's hit Create, and now we're in Xcode itself, and we have an open project. So you can see it starts out by highlighting this file, but for right now, so we can explore the window more efficiently, I'm going to click on this viewcontroller.swift file. And you can see that there are three main areas to the screen. So on the left-hand side is what's called the navigator area, and that shows you the hierarchy of your files and which files are available to you. So all the files in your project as it grows. The next area over here is called the editor area, and that's where you do most of the writing of your code and the laying out of your app. The right-hand side is called the utility area. This is where you'd find the objects to add to your app, such as buttons and labels, and then also where you'd configure them and set all the options for them. At the top, which is the toolbar, you have a number of buttons that will start your app, stop your app, which simulator you want to use, and then some buttons over here that we'll talk about later. And then one of these buttons that we'll talk about now is these hide or show buttons. These actually hide or show the different sides of your screen. So if you know you're just going to be doing coding for a while and you want to maximize the real estate available, you can hide the left and right panel. By default, the bottom panel is hidden, and that's what's called the debug area. And you can see I can hide or show that by toggling that button. When you're debugging your program, you will see information about the different variables here. We'll look at that in a few minutes. And if you're printing information to the console, that would show up on this side. So we can see a lot of information about your app in the debug area. For right now, I'm going to hide that. So let's take a look at the different files that are available by default. Let's start with the top with this testing file. And this is actually your Xcode project file, and it contains a lot of the settings, in fact most of the settings for your app. Again, you can see the display name, version number, and so on. Down here it's going to show me which iOS version number my app is targeting, and you can see the different versions available. When in doubt, you want to stick with the latest one that you can. You can choose if you want your app to be available for iPhone only, iPad only, or all of them. And things like which orientation you want to force your app to be in. Again, there's a lot of information here, but the only other one I want to look at is capabilities. And under this, you can turn on or off different options for your app, such as if you want to have maps available, or if you want to use the Apple Wallet or iCloud, you would turn those off here or on here. The next file we're going to look at are these .swift files, and as you can imagine, those are files where you're going to write Swift code, and you might see things you recognize already like var for variable, and most of the code you write will be in these viewcontroller.swift files. These are the main files that control what you see on your screen. The main storyboard is where you actually lay out the user interface of your app. So this is where when you click on it, you see kind of a roughly phone-shaped screen. This is where you would add buttons, you would add different text fields, tables, and so on, so that you can show exactly what your app will look like. Moving down in the navigation area, I have this assets.exe assets file, and this is where you put the images and so on that are available to your app. And you can see there's an app icon set already available where you would add the different sized app icons that are required for the App Store. The launch screen storyboard is very similar to the main storyboard, except you would format your launch screen, which is the screen that shows up right before your app fully loads. And then finally, we have this info.plist, and it is a text file that again holds all the different options for your app, most of which can be configured in this testing file. So we tend not to use this one as much. Okay, let's go back to the viewcontroller.swift file and actually take a look at how we would run and stop and start an app. So this is the button that you would click to run your app, which we'll do in a second. This here shows the scheme, the active scheme of your app, and it's here where I can select all the different simulators I want my app to run on. So I can simulate running my app on any of these devices. Right now, by default, it's the iPhone XR, which we're going to leave that for right now. But you might notice that I can actually run it on a connected device, which we'll talk about how to do later on in the course. So again, we're going to leave it at the iPhone XR. And in order to run it, I can either click this button, or if I just hit the Command and the R key, it runs it. Now, the first time you open up one of the simulators, it actually takes a few minutes to open the simulator and turn it on. So I'm going to click down here, and you can see I have the iPhone XR running OS version 12.1, but it's going to start up and it's going to take a few minutes. So I'm just going to pause and let this finish running. So you can see the app starts up and I get a blank window, which if we remember the storyboard was completely blank, so we would expect that. So this is not a very exciting app, but we'll make some better ones later. A couple of things to point out. If you hold the command and the left and right arrows, if I hold the command and do the right arrow, it rotates my device. And so I can see what the app will look like as it's rotated, which is very handy to do. When I'm done taking a look at that, I can go back to Xcode and just stop the app by clicking on that button. And you can see the simulator stays loaded in the background. I tend not to close the simulator as much as possible because I don't want to have to wait that long each time for the app to start running. Now, the simulator for Xcode is fantastic, but if at all possible, it's always a good idea to run your app on an actual device, which you can do by connecting your app to your computer. And once you do that, it will show up here, and you can actually install that app on the device. To do that, you need a developer account from Apple, and developer accounts are free if you don't want to publish in the App Store. So if you just kind of want to dabble and play around and put an app on one device, you can get a free developer account. If you actually want to publish your app in the App Store, there is a fee associated with that, and you can find out more about that on Apple's developer site. Okay, let's talk about the inevitable problems that will arise as you are working through your app. So one of the great skills of a programmer is debugging. So let's take a look at how Xcode will help you debug your app. So there's three different kinds of errors you might run into. And the first are warnings, and they are extremely common. So let me go ahead and write in a line here. This is one that you've probably seen before. Let number equal 10. And again, you can see I'm just creating a constant, and it has the name number, and I'm equaling 10. And you can see that Xcode immediately pops up this warning. You can see it's a warning by a yellow triangle, and it says this value number was never used. And it just lets you know that there's a piece of code that's not being used, and you can either delete it if you know you're not going to use it, or if in this case this is just the first line I typed, you can ignore it, and the next time you use it, that warning will go away. But again, Xcode is constantly building in the background to let you know these possible errors. So let me delete that line so we get rid of that warning. Now, other errors are called compiler errors, and those are errors that will not even let your program run. Let me go back for a second and put that let number equal 10. If I go under product and build, or I could just use the command B, I can build it. You can see it's building up here. Oh, and you can see the build succeeded. So this warning does not stop my program from being built. But compiler errors, however, will stop that. So let me do a couple of things. Let me first of all delete the parentheses off of here. And then I'm going to add navigation controller dot title equals, do this, dot title equals my, whoops, put in quotes, my first app. And you can see I'm getting a couple of different actual compiler errors. You can see this one has an exclamation point inside a stop sign, and this one has like a dot inside a stop sign. So let me go ahead and hit Control B to build this. And now you can see this build failed. I couldn't even build my program because of these compiler errors. And you can see this says expression resolves to an unused function. If I click on that, nothing really happens. So it's giving me some information, but I have to know that I have to put those parentheses in myself. When you get these type of compiler errors, however, with the dot in it, if I click on it, it's going to give me some options on how to fix it. So I think this is the one that fixes it, and notice it puts this question mark in. We'll talk about what that means down the road. But now I have no more compiler errors. If I hit Command B now, my build should succeed, and it does. Okay, so we have warnings and compiler errors. The third type of error is bugs, and these are issues that the compiler does not catch but can cause problems in running. So I'm actually going to create a very quick array, and if you haven't worked with arrays before, we'll do that soon. So let me go to cities, and that equals Cupertino, whoops, Mountain View, and Redmond. And again, that's just an array that I've created with 3 cities in it. And you can, if you see that, it shows me the warning that says I've never used it, which we just saw a few minutes ago. But I can do the cities dot remove, whoops, I want remove first. And you can probably guess that remove first removes the first element in that array. So I might do that, whoops, remove first, and then I'll do it one more time, remove first. Let me actually add one more, cities.remove first. And as you can guess, I have 3 items, but I'm going to remove 4 things, which is going to be a problem. But let me go ahead and Command B to build it. And the build succeeded. The compiler found no errors, there was no syntax errors. It's fine. So let's actually try to run it with a Command R. We'll see if we can get on our, you can see it's installing on my thing. And now you can see that it actually, there's a crash. So I have a fatal error. The simulator stopped, went to the background, and it's showing that there is an error in my code. Can't remove first element from an empty collection. So actually, it's giving me some good information about what's going on. But we're going to use this as a way to show the debugger. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So it stops the program from running. And we are going to look at the Xcode debugger and see how that works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a breakpoint. This is pretty simple code. I know the error is in here somewhere. So I'm going to click to the left of the line numbers and just click once, and it puts this blue shape in, and that's a breakpoint. And now when I click the run button, it will actually stop program execution at this breakpoint. You can see it starts to run it. And again, I don't have a fatal error this time, but it stopped running. And down here at the bottom, you can see the value of my variable. I have this cities array, and if I expand it, it says the first element's Cupertino, Mountain View, etc. That's pretty handy. So if I want to keep going through my program, I'm going to use this button here that's called Step Over, which basically just goes line by line. So I'm going to click on that, and now I'm in the second line. Notice it now has two values, Mountain View and Redmond, because I removed the first. So if I step through again, now it has one value, just Redmond. If I step over again, it's 0 values, and now I'm on this line. And if I step over, aha, now I get the fatal error, and I know it's because I removed something that had 0 values. So you can see the debugger is a pretty handy tool to find out where the errors in the problem lie. When you're done debugging, you can just drag your breakpoint off to the side and it goes away. Then you could remove the incorrect line and run your program successfully on your simulator. So hopefully that will come up and we shouldn't get any fatal errors. And it looks like it's running fine, even though there's nothing on the screen. So that's a very quick look at Xcode, how to run programs, how to stop programs, and how to do some very simple debugging. In the next video, we'll look more at the basics of Interface Builder and how to actually add elements to your app, such as buttons and labels, etc.